that drew his attention, and he watched the SUV accelerate down the road. He said he saw it driving in a normal straight pattern until it suddenly jerked to the left and went over the cliff. There are three facts. It comes down to basically three facts that the evidence will show. That just before that SUV went off the cliff, that there was no braking. 2, that there was hard acceleration. And 3, that there was a hard left turn. 3 categories of evidence will be presented to establish each of these 3 facts. And one is the physical evidence on the road that shows no braking, shows a hard acceleration, a hard left turn. 2 is the eyewitness who saw it accelerating and taking a jerk to the left off the cliff. And 3 is the data retrieved from the SUV crash data recorder that indicated that the brakes were not used and quantifies the acceleration and the turn. Therefore, when the evidence is presented to state, we'll ask the court find that the defendant intentionally or knowingly drove off that cliff, thereby causing the death of her sister and being guilty of murder in the second degree.
Thank you, Mr. Duval. Are there any witnesses in the room? Witnesses? Very well. Mr. Pavard, do you wish to make an opening statement now or
now?
Okay, very well. Go ahead.
Okay, please support counsel. This case is a tragic accident, not murder. The state has the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt to prove that this was an intentional murder. There's ample reasonable doubt in this case, and in fact, the evidence in this case is going to prove that it was in fact a tragic accident. Evidence in many different forms. We have eyewitness evidence. We have evidence from the road. We have evidence from the decedent's body. And we have evidence from the vehicle, both in the damage to the vehicle and in the computer data from the airbag control module, which measures in the last 5 seconds before the airbags are deployed, it measures the steering, the braking, the speed, and the acceleration. And it also tells you when the airbags went off. First off, with respect to the eyewitnesses, we have several eyewitnesses who, in seconds before the collision and with the wall and the dirt berm, and I'll explain the difference there in a minute, witnessed violent fighting and hair pulling, that the passenger was violently pulling my client's hair with both of her hands, pulling it so hard it was jerking her head over towards the passenger side seat. That was happening not only as the vehicle was stopped, and Mr. Lau, the driver of the Boy Scout van, will say it was while the vehicle was stopped with its flashers on, that was happening, and that the hair pulling continued up until the point that the car got nose to nose with him, and then he took his eyes off the Duval vehicle, so he doesn't know what happened after that. But the Boy Scout sitting behind him did see everything. He saw that violent hair pulling while the car was both stopped, the violent hair pulling while the car was moving towards them, and he says he took his eyes off them just for a second as they went past, and then he heard the car accelerate. He turned around and looked at the SUV, the Duval vehicle, and he could see that the 2 people in the car were fighting. He said they were punching and hair pulling. The passenger was pulling the driver's hair, and then the car went left over the cliff. We have eyewitness evidence of violent passenger interference with my client while she's driving. So violent that we have evidence from the body, the autopsy, Anastasia Duval, in her hands had long blonde hair. She's pulling my client's hair so violently that it pulled her hair out. Evidence from the road. There's photos of tire marks, some taken that night and some the next day. The tire marks show the car not taking a sudden left turn, but just running off the road. And where this ran off the road, there was a cement wall with rock and cement, and then there was a part where that wall ends, and apparently the wall had been either washed out or fell apart, a part where it goes right down to the ocean and the rocks below. There is no dirt or anything behind this one spot, and you'll see pictures of that. But instead of it being cemented back in, they just piled dirt and rocks there. So it's like a dirt berm is what it is, very loose dirt berm. And this was the place where the car first impacted. And evidence from the vehicle will show that, and from the airbag control module, will show when the car initially went through the dirt berm, it went through on the driver's side, but that did not activate the airbags. It was only when the passenger side, the front passenger side, impacted the edge of the rock wall that the front airbags deployed, as well as the passenger side airbag deployed. So the driver went through the dirt berm. And this is important in looking back at the data, because the airbag data is from the time of the airbags deployed. So when it first impacts the dirt berm, no airbags, goes through, and about a half a second later it hits the edge of the cement wall, which causes a more violent collision, which knocks off the passenger side and the front airbags. And you'll see damage from the vehicle scraping along the cement wall on the passenger side. There's no such scraping on the driver's side. And what happens at this point is the car goes through, falls over the cliff, and hits a rock outcropping. About 1.5 seconds later is when the passenger, the driver's side airbag deploys, the side airbag. Now the frontal airbags, you'll hear from testimony, I think both the state's witness as well as ours will tell you that the front airbags, they go off and then they deflate almost instantaneously. Their position is to prevent a frontal collision, but they deflate right away. The side airbags stay inflated to prevent rollover. So the car with the frontal airbags deflated, and both of these people in the car, my client and her sister, were not wearing their seatbelts. The car goes over the cliff and about 1.5 seconds later crashes into a rock outcropping, frontal. And I think the evidence will show that's where Anastasia Duval was thrown into the windshield and the visor and sustained an L-shaped injury here. The car then flips back end over like this, throwing Anastasia into the back seat and smashes down on the rocks below, crushing and killing Anastasia. So what the airbag evidence there will show is that the officers expected testimony that there was a sudden 288-degree turn, which we'll have an expert say is nearly impossible to do, did not happen. That was caused by the impact of the left front, the driver's side front wheel with the dirt berm and rocks. The acceleration, again, the state has said the accelerator was floored, and I think the court's a little familiar with this because we had the motion to dismiss and then seen the grand jury testimony where the officer testified the accelerator was floored. We'll show the airbag module information shows that's not accurate. There was 100% acceleration. Then she takes her foot off the gas, completely off the gas, 0%. And then there's acceleration again, and no braking. And this we will explain. Submits there's no intent there. There's an intent to take your foot off the accelerator and stop the car while you're having your hair pulled and missing the brake. So we've got the airbag module evidence, which you'll hear testimony from. You'll see there's actual the data. And again, that's not opinion. That's actual computer data. Evidence from the vehicle, evidence from the body, and evidence from the road will all prove that this was a tragic accident. Certainly beyond a reasonable doubt. Certainly a reasonable doubt that there was any criminal behavior whatsoever, and that my client is not guilty. Thank you.